I want to thank you for coming out today as we do our web presentation with our partner Hyperfish. And this is really very timely, particularly with today's news, but we'll get that in a moment. And the crux of the matter is, how do you get more out of the worth of the data about your people in Office 365 and SharePoint and the enterprise in general? And we'll give you some very good examples around that in a moment. But just a couple quick housekeeping things. So first, about us. Gigworks has been focused on SharePoint for more than a decade now, in business for about 15, 16 years. And over the years, with our expertise in SharePoint and now Office 365, we've won a number of awards, have been a gold partner since the beginning, and are approved vendors for Microsoft Legal and Corporate Affairs. And a particular note, we are virtual technology specialists for the, Microsoft's New York Enterprise Group. So when Microsoft has an enterprise customer and they have specific business needs that they're looking to see how the platforms could work for them, we're brought in as subject matter experts to present to those clients and to work with them. So going back, given that we have a rich and long history within technology and the Microsoft ecosystem, we have solution expertise across the full Microsoft stack, obviously inclusive of Office 365. And we have a number of industry business solution, we have a lot of expertise, let's go that route, on professional services, legal, facilities management, architecture, engineering, financial services, healthcare, and pharma. So clearly our focus is around professional services, but we also have a number of clients over the years that are in manufacturing and other lines of business as well. And just to really underscore our length within the industry and our expertise, we've also launched over the last year our own software as a service solution called Project Ready that drives control and visibility around collaboration, really project management, anybody who's project oriented, and a very unique set of document control solutions that are, as far as we can tell, the only ones in market today. So moving along, a little more housekeeping, and I promise we'll get to what we said we'll get to. We have a number of packaged solutions. So workshops around SharePoint and Office 365, business solution planning, premium advisory services, which kind of rolls up everything we do, where we are, your architects and experts on demand for a number of things that would be applicable within the enterprise. Nintex workflow quick starts, our SharePoint modernization assessment. If you're unfamiliar with this, we ran this campaign just very recently, and happy to send you more information on that as well. And then the Hyperfish directory analyzer, which gives you a profile health check and a report as to the condition of AD and AD profile information. In terms of Project Ready, which I mentioned earlier, this is our full suite of applications, again designed for the engineering, architecture, and construction sector, corporate legal, and PMOs everywhere. And with that, and as we get into Hyperfish, on the Gigworks side, which is a traditional SharePoint systems integrator and consultancy, as the product has evolved, so is the industry, and so is Gigworks. And so with that, over the years, as SharePoint became the dominant platform of type in the world today, we also came to recognize just the plethora and number of very high-value third-party solutions that lower risk, reduce costs, have better long-term support and scalability. And with it, we've come to take it upon ourselves to understand those solutions, develop expertise in those solutions, and have them as part of our toolkit that we can recommend as appropriate to our clients. And we've always looked at this in really two bags of functionality, right? So there's advanced functionality that might drive you for or two buckets, if you will. Advanced functionality as it relates to governance and compliance, of which Hyperfish is a great example, and also around industries. So with that, typically, if you're within financial services, legal, pharma, et cetera, and so forth, you absolutely have governance and compliance demands. And with that, we've gone out and sourced the best of breed and best in market to make available to our customers. And so I just went through this very quickly. Why third parties? Again, feature doesn't exist. You want to reduce risk. You want a high return on investment. Why build something custom when somebody else has done it for a plethora of customers and invest millions of dollars in that. And it's immediate. The speed to market to deliver solutions that may, for instance, be required to satisfy regulatory requirements is far more immediate when you go off the shelf. And so with that, Active Directory. Active Directory, talking to the younger folks in my shop, if you will, AD was the big breakaway from Microsoft in 2000. It really was the game changer, at least as I saw it, for the Microsoft framework, right? Where AD and object-oriented LDAP really started to provide just amazing management capabilities. But it's always been a problem. Nobody updates it. End users are unaware of how to update. In fact, you don't want them to directly update it. Right? This would be too privileged. And with that, the information is incomplete, it's inaccurate, and you don't get compliant information. And so there's no lifecycle management around this, and it's just sat there as the red-headed stepchild of the enterprise for quite some time. Now, for what it's worth, statistics around this, 80% of Active Directories don't have basic organizational details or structure. And further, you go, so really, what is that to me? If Active Directory has, sort of limped out there for 20 years, what's the big deal now? And we're going to get to what that big deal is through Jeremy Thack, who's going to be taking the presentation after this slide. And without Active Directory being properly maintained, especially in the modern cloud infrastructure into which you're walking, you have a loss of productivity, it's expensive to maintain, you don't have a single version of the truth, and you can't automate decisions. And so we'll get into this in the next couple of slides with Jeremy, but for what it's worth, dynamic groups in Office 365, the recent announcement around LinkedIn today, where, well, we all know that Microsoft was hunting them, the EU said okie dokie, but this morning on LinkedIn, appropriately, the CEO of Microsoft talked about specifically the role that Active Directory profile information would play in enterprise LinkedIn and integrations therein. So Delft, team sites, LinkedIn, Active Directory is back, and it's back in fashion. And with that, the need to maintain that profile information has a really very demonstrative return on investment now as it relates to automation of Active Directory groups based upon profile information, maintaining HIPAA and SOX compliancy, and frankly making Delft and team sites and all the, rather Microsoft Teams work, because they have great features and functions to drive productivity, but they're all going to pivot off of that Active Directory profile information. And so with that, it can no longer be ignored. 20 years later, this is more needed than ever, and in certain respects, in a way that it never has before. So with that, I believe it is time to give this over to Jeremy. Jeremy?
Thanks very much, and thank you for joining the call, guys. Let me just share my screen, take over from Joe there, and Joe, if you can let us know when that comes through.
Yes, screen looks good, Jeremy.
Excellent. So my name is Jeremy Thack. I'm the Vice President of Product Technology at Hyperfish. You may know me. I was a 5-year SharePoint MVP. I blogged a lot in the developer space, and I just finished a 3-year stint at Microsoft as a product manager, both in Office 365 and Azure. If you'd like to continue following me, jeremythack.com is my website for my blog, and @jthack on Twitter. Now, as Joe mentioned, there are many different ways that Active Directory is managed within an organization. A lot of the research that we've done ourselves at Hyperfish, and what I've seen in my history within my career working with Microsoft customers, is that typically there's a few different ways that people try and keep Active Directory up to date. Whether it's now, if they're in Office 365, they're using the Delft profile updater for users to basically go in and edit whatever data is in a modifiable state from a permissions perspective via them to go and update typically their phone number or their address within the organization. But often things such as the manager field or the department or the office location, the division, which is stored in Active Directory, is often read-only and is managed by another process within the organization, because there needs to be an approval process in place. You don't necessarily want your users going and changing the manager field in an organization or the department they're within without some kind of approval process that happens, because a lot of business systems consume that data and make business decisions on that. And so a lot of organizations go down the journey of having custom forms that update information, and developers typically have to get involved to do that, and they have to maintain that custom application. We see a lot of HR organizations that maintain spreadsheets of their employees, and they will go and update the department changes or the manager changes within staff within an organization and send that to IT, and IT then usually run a custom PowerShell or batch script that then goes and updates Active Directory on a weekly or a monthly basis, whatever the cadence and kind of effort they want to commit to from an IT perspective is. So the problems with those approaches is that there's a lot of investment in IT, there's a lot of overhead in terms of HR in managing these things, and often the management and ownership is very confused within the organization. The most expensive way of doing these things is involving help desk, where you have to call into a help desk, and when I say expensive, it's maintaining and running those staff, but it's also involving individuals having to spend time speaking to someone on the phone or chatting to a human being in person to get those things updated. Larger enterprises we do see have larger HRMS systems, human resource information management systems, where they control the information from those systems. The feedback we've had there is a lot of these systems have very poor user interfaces because these larger enterprise systems aren't modern like we expect with mobile apps or having very modern web interfaces that work in the latest browsers and are very intuitive to use. And so there's lots of different ways that we've seen organizations trying to keep Active Directory information up to date. Now, the reason this is important is an IDC research study was done very recently where it was shown that up to 15 to 35% of their time is searching for information, and this information is often people expertise, where we're trying to locate the person within an organization to ask them a question because they're skilled in a particular area, or maybe we know they would have written documents that we're trying to look for to research more information for our organization. And unfortunately, that 40% of corporate users reported that they aren't able to find the information on their intranets. And as another stat there, what that kind of looked at from a modern-sized organization, in this case with IDC, it was a 1,000-seat organization, was that was costing them a lot of money a year in total in operational costs in not being able to find that information. And likewise, this notion of the opportunity cost there of not being able to make educated decisions and in-time business decisions could have an opportunity cost of nearly 15 million annually. We'll provide the link to that IDC white paper, and it's extremely useful to understand how technology can help to reduce these costs and increase your opportunity cost. And Active Directory plays a big part in that, and also so does Office 365 and SharePoint. Now, from the research that we've done with our customers, we've seen that over 86% of our customers typically don't have mobile phone numbers included, 80% don't have photos within their directories, and 64% don't even have the manager field included. When Microsoft get on stage in keynotes and they talk about things such as how Delft works and looking at org charts are driven from that manager field in Active Directory. And so without this type of information stored in AD, a lot of the productivity tools that you've invested in already won't work correctly. And so we did some stats which we can share the calculation sheet there, but essentially we typically think that if a mobile phone number's gone and you have 1 or 2 calls a week where you need to call people on your mobile, if they're not in their profile within Delft or easily accessible in Skype for Business, that's over 800 hours of lost time finding contact information over a year period in an organization with 1,000 people. And also actually finding people from the perspective of knowing who they look like in the office, or in a large departmental organization where you might have multiple offices and multiple locations across the globe, having those type of photos in there to associate with people often leads to a lot of issues in trying to physically find those people when you go into those buildings. Whereas if you were constantly seeing their face when you're having dialogue with them over email or on Skype for Business, you're more likely to recognize those people in person, and it builds a much better kind of culture within your organization, especially in larger organizations where you often may not even get to meet them physically. And then lastly, trying to find people in your organization that you should be working with. Typically, you'd want to do that by navigating the org chart that's available in Delft. But again, if that manager field is not populated, it makes it very hard to try and find, okay, well, I know the head of marketing is Bob, but I know that I can't speak to Bob because he's too high up the food chain, and I need to have one of his direct reports be part of this meeting. Unfortunately, it's extremely hard to navigate if you don't have those manager fields filled out. So Hyperfish began through a journey between both Brian and CJ. Brian was the co-founder and CEO of Nintex, which is a very popular workflow product in the kind of SharePoint Office 365 ecosystem. And CJ worked at Microsoft as a group program manager in the Office 365 division. And they realized that this was a problem, and they had a great idea to build a product called Hyperfish, Analyzer Directory, that helps you to kind of fill this solution within your organization. So Hyperfish essentially allows you to complete your directory. It enhances employee engagement. It saves time both to IT, but it also saves time, more importantly, to all of your employees within your organization. And it unlocks the value of the investments that you've already made in Office 365, inside of SharePoint and Delft, and even in your Office clients. But more importantly, because Active Directory is that hub for all other systems within your organization, it unlocks the value that you have in those tools as well. So essentially, Hyperfish does an analyzing process over your directory for compliance. Not only will it recommend whether you have attributes within users' profiles missing, but also to make sure things like telephone number is in the right valid formats, or that the profile photo that's been uploaded is of the requirements within your organization. Now, we proactively collect updates from our users. So rather than it being on them as an onus to go in regularly or on a yearly basis, maybe as typically we find in organizations, go to the profile update page and hit that page and make those updates to the department and the manager, Hyperfish actually proactively reaches out and creates a dialogue with that user via email, via conversational bots, or also reaching out and filling out that form. And also, in the future versions, just to kind of give you a highlight of our vision, we're going to be intelligently suggesting changes to users based on other systems. So for instance, if we know that our employees are in sales and they're diligently keeping their LinkedIn profile up to date with title changes, or maybe they've got their profile photo up there because it's very accessible for them to go and update their LinkedIn profile, we'll actually view that LinkedIn profile and reach out to them in their internal communication channel and suggest that maybe they don't need to use their LinkedIn profile photo for their internal Active Directory photo. Or for instance, we'll use the Microsoft Graph API to reach in and look at their email signature. And typically their email signature they can keep up to date because it's very easy and accessible to do that in Outlook. And maybe their phone number is different to what we have in Active Directory, or their job title is different, or their office location is different. We'll actually make that suggestion to make those changes. And often what they'll do is if their email signature is out of date and AD is actually accurate, they can go in and change the email signature, but more often than not, the email signature is the kind of the more up-to-date information there, and it will kind of prompt them to go into the Hyperfish tool and make those changes. So our service runs in the cloud. We are using conversational chatbots, which is quite a new thing in the industry right now, as one channel to start that dialogue with the users within your organization. And we're using artificial intelligence across the board, and you'll see that in the demo of how we're doing that to do things such as check the validation of the user photos based on the compliance requirements of your organization. Now, when we talk about unlocking the value, there are a lot of products within Office 365, and if you're an on-premises customer using SharePoint Server or Skype for Business, you can get benefit out of having that complete profile data within your organization. One of the biggest things I've seen, which was mentioned earlier on, was that there is this notion of what we call dynamic membership for groups within Active Directory. What this allows you to do is, based on attributes within Active Directory, do things such as, I want to create an Active Directory group, and if the department attribute within a user is equal to marketing, I'm going to put them in this marketing group. Now, from a cost savings perspective, what that means is you only have to keep your Active Directory attributes up to date, and you may have various different groups that have different conditions based on attributes in Active Directory, and therefore membership is automatically managed for you rather than having to manage these groups manually when people change the different divisions and having to kind of pull people out of groups and moving into other groups. and also have to update Active Directory. And so it's a really compelling thing we're seeing a lot of organizations do from an information architecture perspective. Now, with Active Directory, with that dynamic membership, that is a premium option of Active Directory in Azure. On Active Directory Server, on premises, you can do a similar thing with dynamic membership with distribution lists as well. So if you're trying to communicate to various different parts of your organization, maybe you're wanting to send things out all to the salespeople or to internal IT or maybe just to HR, again, those distribution lists need to be managed somehow. Now, if those could be automated, for instance, via just looking at the department field, that gives you a much faster productivity and also ensures you're only communicating with the right people within your organization. Now, from a how does this look in a Delft scenario? Now, obviously, Microsoft would never go on stage and demonstrate Delft from the perspective of this kind of profile. What they would like to show is something where your photo is populated and that there's documents that are either modified by yourself or are being modified by other people within your team who are peers of you or maybe your manager. Now, it can only know that if it knows who is in your organization. It needs to know who your manager is, who your peers are, to go and search and crawl that stuff. And so with Delft, you really only unlock the potential once you have all your Active Directory data up to date. So if I jump over to a browser now and quickly go to hyperfish.com, and there'll be a link in the PowerPoint deck and in the emails that get sent out after this webinar. Essentially, we give you the ability to run a free analyzer. So if you go through analysis, you'll see a sample of the report we send out here. And when I click Analyze Now, that'll actually take me to a page where if I'm using Office 365, I have the ability to come in here and also with on-premises to run this report, which I'll show you in a moment, to give you an idea about how fresh or unfortunately unfresh in a lot of cases your Active Directory is. So for Azure Active Directory, you can actually just click Cloud Only and run that immediately. With on-premises and hybrid, you have to download an agent, and there's a few little steps you need to do once you've got the agent running on your local machine. And this gives you the ability to see this report. So if I show that report now, essentially what we do is we'll give you a summary of how many active accounts you have in Active Directory that are defined as a user and aren't service accounts. We'll highlight how many of those accounts have got missing information based on a few different categories. And we'll give you an understanding of how many hours you could save per year based on some ROI calculations that we have within our ROI white paper if you were to have a complete directory for those users. Now we break this down a bit more. So we'll show that only 4% of your users in your organization have profile photos, or that only 5% of your users actually have a manager field populated in them. And again, if we go scroll down to the report a little deeper here, you'll start to see things like, well, what's the knock-on effects here? Well, if we don't have manager fields put in there, we aren't able to generate org charts, which are available in Delft or even in Microsoft Teams now. We also don't have the ability to do any kind of automated approval workflow. So if you're already using Nintex or if you're using SharePoint Designer and you've got a leave submission form, but you need your manager to approve it, well, you can't automate entering that manager. You're going to have to prompt that end user to put their manager field in there every time. And so those small little nips of productivity really start to build up. And so Active Directory really helps to kind of improve that. Now, so if I go over as an individual here, I'm logged in as Megan Brown here inside of Office 365 in a demo tenant that I have. You'll see that Megan's been getting emails, and I wish my inbox looked this empty on a Wednesday morning, but it functionally is not. But you'll see here that we actually have the ability to see that there's a mobile phone field missing in my profile. And if I clicked on this button, it would allow me to jump over to a profile editing page, which I'll show in a moment, to allow you to edit that mobile phone number. Now I could just make this conversation and dialogue start directly from email, and I could reply to my Hyperbot directly here and say my mobile phone number is, and then type my number out. But I'm going to show the profile editor just for the purposes of time here. And you'll see that it shows not only my mobile phone numbers and so forth in here, but also other data. So maybe if I notice that actually my mobile phone number is incorrect here, and maybe I say that there's an extension number, you'll notice that I'm getting a validation error here. And it's because we give you the ability to have validation rules for formatting to allow you to make those changes. And as soon as I change the number into a correct format, that error goes away. I can save that data here, and what you'll notice is that it comes up as pending. Then what that means is unlike if I went into Delft and made those edits, it's actually going to go through this administration process now where someone is going to be notified with my organization that Megan has requested a change for her phone number. If I go into the administration tool here and just refresh my approvals page, you'll now see that Megan has a change that's saying the number went from the .5 here to a .7, and I could go through and approve that change. Now that would notify Megan once that change has gone through, and I'd go and update Active Directory, which would mean then that Delft would have the most up-to-date information, so would my contact cards in Outlook and so forth. Now just to kind of highlight some of the artificial intelligence stuff we have going on inside of Hyperfish, I can either drag and drop, or I can click and select a photo here. So if I was to click a photo and I like the photo of myself in this picture and I just said, oh, I'm just going to use this, you can actually set settings in the background here from a compliance perspective that will say things like we only want one face in a photo. And so we're using cognitive services, part of the Azure offering that Microsoft has, to validate those photos of things like too many faces in a photo. So, for instance, if I went in here and uploaded a photo with just my face in there and click Next, you'll see that that's okay once I click Validate, and then it looks good. If I click Save there, that will go and submit that, and you'll see again that it says pending an approval process in there as well. Now, from a perspective in the background, you'll see that as an administrator, I have the ability, or as an approver, I have the ability to kind of see those things at a glance. And if I know that that's not really Megan, obviously in this case, I can actually go through and reject that change. And again, Megan will be notified that that photo wasn't either appropriate from a human check, but also wasn't maybe even her in that instance. And we have an event log here. So for instance, I can go through and just look at what things have happened, like this approval process was requested, and then these were rejected. And you can see here that it made that commitment to the mobile phone number as well. So when we go into Delft, for instance, when I jump down to my organization, I can see now that Megan reports up to Diego, who reports to Patty. And you can see here that Diego now is showing up when he's making edits to a document in the discovering documents aspect of Delft, which wouldn't occur if I had my manager field, didn't have that populated. So one last thing before I hand back is we also have this Hyperbot, which allows me inside of Slack, for now, to modify my profile. So you can see here I started the conversation by just saying hello to my bot. And so if people are more comfortable with working with more modern technologies and having that conversation, it's now going to have a conversation and ask me what I want to change. So you can see here I could say I want to change my department. And so I can say what department I want to be in. And so I could say I'm changing to sales. And then it will say, okay, it's going to set that to sales. Is that continue to make that update? You click yes, and that'll go away and make that update into Active Directory, obviously once it's done, the approval process, if that approval process is required for that field. So hopefully you can see that we're trying to reach and start that dialogue with users inside of the organization in as many ways as we can. And over time we learn with the artificial intelligence of where we get the best interaction with an individual, whether they're happy just communicating via email, whether they'll go into the user form, or whether they'll actually communicate via instant messenger inside of Slack or whatever conversational technology you have like Microsoft Teams.
As always, we'd like to thank everybody for coming out today, and thank you, Jeremy. And as Ricky pointed out, any additional information, anything that we can supply you, that's what we're here for. And please do fill out the survey so that we can follow up with you with the appropriate materials for your convenience to review, as it were. So again, thank you, everybody, and see you next time.
Thanks, guys.